One of Wright's first apprentices had been Edgar Kaufman, Jr., the son of a wealthy Pittsburgh department store owner. He hadn't stayed with architecture very long himself, but his father had become fascinated with Frank Lloyd Wright, and in 1934 asked him to design a weekend hideaway for his family next to their favorite waterfall along a little stream in western Pennsylvania called Bear Run. Wright visited the site, had the apprentices make an elaborate plot plan that showed the location of every rock and tree, and then did nothing for 3 months.
He never liked to draw until he knew what he was going to draw. And every so often we would ask, Mr. Wright, are you going to do something? And he'd say yes, and he'd walk by. All of a sudden, one day, he gets a telephone call from Mr. Kaufman.
Kaufman was in Milwaukee, just a few hours away from Taliesin.
Mr. Wright says, hello, E.J., how are you? Come along, we're waiting for you. And he hung up. Milwaukee is 140 miles, 140 minutes, and he hasn't drawn a line. Kaufman, the client, is on his way, and he sits down, and he starts to draw, and he draws a plan. And he draws the first floor plan, how it relates to everything. It's got to be a bridge so you can get across the water. They shows just where the waterfall is. He draws the second floor plan, and he goes along and shows how the balconies are, and he says, and we'll have a bridge across so that E.J. and Lillian, that was her name, can walk out and walk from the bedrooms or from the house up and have a picnic up above. Then the top floor is Junior's room. Then he draws what we call a section through the building. That's the way you can see how all the heights are. And he's drawing and drawing, and Bob and I are feeding him pencils. He breaks them, and he puts a color on, and takes it off, and he rubs it all off, and so on. And anytime anyone walks in the drafting room, you turn around, shh, you don't wait. And people knew if Mr. Wright's working, and you don't walk through the drafting room. Then he starts to draw an elevation, a big elevation of the whole house. And the whole drawing is actually that big. Normally, we start at a scale where you draw this big, but no, he's got it going this big. And he's putting the trees, and he knows where every damn tree is, where every rock is. He gets that all done, and then his Mr. Wright's secretary comes in and says, Mr. Wright, Mr. Kaufman is here. He says, bring him in. And Mr. Wright gets up. He just stands up, and he walks toward Kaufman, and he puts out his hand, and he says, welcome, E.J. We've been waiting for you.
Wright named his building Falling Water. It would eventually become the most famous modern house in the world. And he had drawn it all in less than 3 hours.
Wright asked his client, where do you spend all your time when you're on this property? And they said, oh, we love to picnic on this rock. So what does he do? He builds a house on the rock, and they've lost their picnic place forever. And you can hardly see the rock. You have to go down in the stream, and the bugs eat you alive and all that to look up and see Mr. Wright's masterpiece. And indeed it was.
I think Falling Water was many things. It's a beautiful response to its site, most of all. Instead of standing clear on a grass plain, it's coming out of the rock. Its slabs are anchored in the rock. You go behind Falling Water and you see that they're gripping the rock back there, and then it goes out and it's just barely above the waterfall. And the water is just under you. You feel that you're in danger there, that you are in fact in a kind of suspension in space, where you have to be careful. And the water is always moving under you with that sense of uneasiness as it goes.
It's an extraordinary house. These floating planes over the waterfall, the structural drama, the spatial drama, and the incredible serenity of it all. It's a composition. It's an intricate and perfect composition into which we're invited to walk. And if your name was Kaufman, live. It's as if he was saying, okay, Europeans, you want to do it that way? I'll show you how to do it that way. And then he takes some of their ideas, integrates it with all of his ideas, and comes up with something so much more brilliant and beautiful than anybody else has ever done.
He was just trying to prove to the rest of us that he too could use flat. He always hated flat roofs. But you see, when he caught on, so there's something in this flat roof business, I'll show them. And he did. I mean, he could make even a 50 by 50 room, which is large, look high when it's only 8 feet high. Don't ask me how, because if I could do it, I would.
Great architecture, like any kind of great art, ultimately takes you somewhere that words cannot take you at all. And Falling Water does that the way Chartres Cathedral does that. There's some experience that gets you in your gut, and you just feel it, and you can't quite even say it. My whole life is dealing with architecture and words, and at the end of the day, there's something that I can't entirely say when it comes to what Falling Water feels like. I remember the first time I went to Falling Water, taking a long walk down, looking at it from across the waterfall, and you just wanted to sing. You just looked at it and you wanted to start singing some song or doing something. There was nothing really to say. It was so extraordinary.